everyone, and welcome back to Sunday Reads with Renee. My name is Renee here at Simply Renee. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, commented, and subscribed to my channel. I truly appreciate it as it helps me to grow. Today's video is a little bit more about my opinions on the state of contemporary novels. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of videos talking about how there are no good contemporary novels out there, nothing good or even great is being published. And I do think that's untrue to an extent. But before I begin, I just want to let everyone know that I will be revealing some books in this video with plot points, so therefore spoilers are ahead. And also, I'm going to be using alternative words and phrases because of YouTube rules and regulations. Over the last few weeks, I've been seeing a lot of people discuss here on YouTube about the state of contemporary novels. They feel like there just aren't many good ones out there and that they're getting worse. And a lot of that they say is because of AI slop. Everything's being written like we're not very bright. Some is being written to fit the generation that's more in tune with AI and ChatGTP. Some are not thought-provoking and more. And I believe this is untrue to an extent. I recently did a video on why it is that I am a film buff. And the reason for that is because I like different types of movies. And one of the things I touch on is how I believe that no good movies coming out is untrue to an extent. I think there are some good movies, it's just there isn't a lot of them like there used to be, at least from my perspective. And that's the way I feel about contemporary novels being published. For my own perspective, I really felt there were a lot of newly published contemporary novels that I liked and gravitated to and appealed to me, and ones that I really wanted to read. And a lot of that came from the years of 2020 to 2023. I really felt that was a time, at least from my perspective, that a lot of books were being published that were great, mediocre, or duds, or at least just ones that were appealing and I really wanted to read and get excited for just to see how I felt about it. Not so much in 2024 and 2025. In those 2 years, I didn't really find a lot of newly published works that made me feel excited to pick them up and read them, or at least spend my time reading them. As such, there were only a few that came up in my challenges, and the rest were all just rereads, classics, or ones that were on my to be read list for a while. And so I decided to take a chance on no contemporary works really gravitating to me to fill that hole. I went to the to be read list, which was good in a lot of ways. Had that not happened, I don't think I would have gotten around to reading Erasure by Percival Everett and The Row by Cormac McCarthy, which were both very excellent, even though they're modern classics published 20 years ago. This year, though, for 2026, I felt there were a lot more being published that at least gravitated to me and were appealing, and ones that I really wanted to pick up and try. Among the favorites I've read so far this year in 2026 that are contemporary novels newly published were Anatomy of an Alibi by Ashley Elston and The Reservation by Rebecca Kaufman. I thought both were very good and nicely done. The Reservation is more of a contemporary drama with a little bit of a mystery to it, and The Anatomy of an Alibi is more of a mystery psychological thriller that I found very enjoyable. The other one is Vigil by George Saunders, and this one came highly recommended. I liked the idea of the plot, but when I read it, I found it very difficult. It was a writing structure that just didn't gravitate to me and appeal to me. I had a hard time really getting through it because of just how it was structured, and so it didn't work out very well. And it's a shame because I did come highly recommended, but for me, it just didn't work. YouTuber Jacob Henderson recently put out a video that I thought was very interesting. It's titled, Are Books Getting Worse? And a lot of the explanations he goes into are similar to what I feel about the state of contemporary novels being published today. And a lot of it was very interesting information. He talks about the publication numbers and how out of the millions of books being published a year, there are some that are great and some that are not. And that's kind of how I feel. You get an overload of so many books being published within a single year. It's hard to really find ones that are gems or gravitate to ones that are really appealing or interesting enough to make you want to pick up that book and read it. Information overload is a real thing, and it does happen quite often, even with me. But at the same time, because there are so many out, I can sort through the ones that I really want and the ones that are appealing to me and give it a try. The other thing he discusses in this video is how he's found some people that are comparing today's works to great classics from 100 years ago or more, or ones that are more modern classics like Toni Morrison and Cormac McCarthy. And I think what he talks about is very true. We all get into these situations where we compare things today to the past for different reasons, partly because of nostalgia or partly because we love how the older stuff was written and handled, and we kind of want to see a little bit more of that today. And that can be a very interesting way to do a compare and contrast and discussion. I did a video on literary pairings here last year on the channel, but I also was part of a book club that did literary pairings where they compared classic works with ones written today that have a similar plot or themes and such. So those can be very interesting if you want to give it as a challenge try. But I also agree with him in some ways that to compare an older work to a work today doesn't make too much sense. And a lot of that has to come with what I've done recently, which is I read The Count of Monte Cristo. It's a great classic work, considered the greatest revenge novel of all time. And when I read it, I do think it is worth the hype and the praise that it has. At the same time, it is a very long book. It's over 1,000 pages. And for some people, a book with over 1,000 pages doesn't make much sense, or they don't feel like they want to read a book that's over 1,000 pages. And some people talk about how great the themes are, which is true, but you can find that in a lot of books today that have much shorter form formats. So I think it's great that you want to love the classics and love the older works, and you can still read them and get huge enjoyment out of them. But I agree with Jacob Henderson that to compare them to today's works compared to the older works doesn't really make too much sense, and it really makes us not decide which ones we want to take on in the future. Another thing that Jacob discusses in this video is Booktok and how some people think Booktok has really destroyed literature along with the rest of the internet. And he doesn't agree, similar with me. I think that both of us agree that Booktok can bring a lot of different types of recommendations of books that we may have not thought about or known about and want to give a read and a try, and we can decide for ourselves whether we like it or not. At the same time, I myself can understand the criticisms of Booktok. We live in an age of instant gratification and short attention spans, and so having these short form videos with Booktok or even YouTube Shorts and others can have both a positive and a negative, which I hope to do more of a deep dive of in the future. But basically, I do think the criticisms of Booktok are valid in the terms of quantity over quality. And I do think that is a very real thing because sometimes there's a book that is so successful, so great that it ends up pushing out other books similar to it that create more lower quality works. I recall a time when vampire novels were all the rage because of the huge success of Twilight as well as True Blood, which is based off the Sookie Stackhouse books. And as a result, vampires were hugely popular, and so they started pushing out all these vampire novels, some of them good, some of them duds and terrible. Same with Netflix's Bridgerton. It's based off a book series that suddenly saw sales skyrocket because of the huge success on Netflix. It reintroduced it to fans who maybe haven't read the book series in a while. It may have even helped people to discover it for the first time, and that can be a positive in many ways. At the same time, it can create a situation of pushing out books that are similar to Bridgerton, but not really, and don't offer as much quality because they're really more taking advantage of the huge popularity and the trends that are happening before. And that happens a lot. Publishing is a business, so it's really going to do all that and more, similar to the film industry, where if something is very popular, they'll push it out because it's a way to make money, even if it might not be a great work and a little bit lower quality. Another criticism I can understand is the algorithm. Unfortunately, the algorithm is what it is. It serves the purpose of what it needs to, where if enough people engage in the type of video content that's being put out, it will start to gain a lot of traction, whether that's in the thousands or the millions. And that can be very important to really growing your channel. I YouTube for a year, and I can tell you that the algorithm is very important to me, even though I'm trying to always be authentic and true to myself. And I'm putting out some things that interest people, but sometimes it doesn't really gain a lot of traction. And when it comes to Booktok, the algorithm is very important. It's been essential to getting people into reading, but also into reading different types of material that is suggested. So that can be a positive. At the same time, there can be a negative because so much of the algorithm pushing everything can create a sense of genre fatigue and overhyped content. And what I mean by genre fatigue is in the terms of a certain genre gaining so much traction, it's everywhere, and you just feel a little overwhelmed by it and a little bit tired of it at the moment. In the case of romance novels, they're extremely popular. I like romance novels, I enjoy them, but because I've read so many of them the last few months, I kind of just want to take a break from it for a while I go into summer and just take a break for a while and then just reintroduce it to myself in the fall. And then there's also the case with mystery and psychological thrillers. I enjoy them, they get pushed a lot, which I love. At the same time, I've read so many this year that I've kind of been a little fatigued by it, which is why I didn't put a lot into my spring challenge, but we'll add more into summer. So sometimes, depending on the type of algorithm content that goes through these social media platforms, it can be a little bit overwhelming, a little bit more information overload. So you kind of just don't want to take a chance on the genre at the moment and really just want to try something different, like maybe a sci-fi novel, something nonfiction, something that may not gain a lot of traction, but at least will take you a break from, say, a genre that's a little bit more popular, whether that's romance, mystery, or psychological thriller. Whichever, it does take a little bit of more fatigue and you just need a break from it for a little bit of time because the algorithm, again, just pushes it a little too much at once. In the case of overhyped book content, I can really understand that. There are times where a book can be hyped up so much that you expect something really wonderful out of it, and it doesn't really meet the expectations. I actually had a conversation with my brother the other day about George Orwell's two famous books, 1984 and Animal Farm. Now, I like both these books and highly recommend them, but for my brother, it's a little bit of a different case. He found he liked Animal Farm more than 1984. And the reason he feels that way is because when it came to 1984, it was so hyped up for so long that when he started to read it, it kind of didn't meet his expectations completely. And I think that's perfectly okay. And it does happen with a lot of people, even with myself. I can tell you from my own perspective that I love Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl. I think it's a great book and really worth the hype. But I find some people that don't think it's worth the hype and think it's quite boring. And then there are times where there are hyped books that I read that I don't really like myself. In the case of Taylor Jenkins Reid, her two most famous books are The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six. More Evelyn Hugo than anything else. And I read both those books and I didn't think they were bad, but I also didn't think they were worth the hype. I didn't really like them. I didn't really feel gravitated to them. But there are some people that do think it's worth the hype and recommend it completely. And I think that's fine too. And had it not been for these books being so overhyped, I may have never taken the chance to really read them and decide for myself whether they're worth it or not. So it can have both a positive and a negative effect. But in my case, it was a positive because, again, hyped up so much that I took a chance on them to decide for myself. And I think that can always be a good thing. When doing the research for this video, though, I found that we might be possibly fatigued by contemporary novels and maybe want to do something different or mix it up a little bit. And from my perspective, anyway, that's how I felt. But I do think there are some alternatives to long form contemporary fiction novels if you'd like to give them a try. Something I recommend is short stories and novellas. These are books that are in a more shorter form, of course, and they get straight to the point. Some are great, some not so great, but I do think that's an alternative if you're not interested in looking at more long form contemporary novels that you feel aren't really up to speed and it gets you in a little bit of a slump. Another one I can recommend is nonfiction books. I like nonfiction books, and sometimes I mix them up in there just to get a little bit of a break from fiction novels and try something a little bit different. I did a video earlier this year about the pros and cons of nonfiction and why I like the genre in general. Since then, I have added these to my challenges and reviews. The best one I read so far this year of a newer publication are On Morrison and the Great Contradiction. Of a reread, an older variety for me have been The Bill of Rights and America's Woman. Outside of the historical nonfiction, I enjoyed Milk about the history and evolution of the product, and Frostbite on the revolutionary ideas of improving refrigeration. In closing, though, I do think there are some good contemporary novels being published today. It's just a matter of finding them. In the world of internet, we can have a lot of information overload and that overtakes things. Therefore, I recommend trying something different. I use Bookpage as a way to get a lot of my book recommendations, and they have good reviews at times and some things they recommend that sound appealing and interesting and make me want to give them a try. Another thing you can try is bookstores, but you can also try your local local library. Sometimes they offer great recommendations that are appealing and interesting to me and make me want to give these books a try. And then there's also checking things off your to be read list. And this can be great because I've done that before and I still do it even today. Earlier this year, I decided to do a few checkoffs of my to be read list. And one of them is Winter People, published in 2014. I always wanted to read it and decided to do it this year and thought it was pretty good. And then, of course, there is The Count of Monte Cristo. That was a classic read that I had been trying to get off my to be read list for a while. Decided to take a chance on it this year and glad I did because I did enjoy it and thought it was well written. It was the same in 2024. As I mentioned earlier at the start of the video, I found a bunch of books in 2024 newly published that weren't interesting to me, so I decided to do a little bit more rereads that year along with some classic reads and checking things off my to be read list. And among them were James M. Cain's classic novels, Double Indemnity, and The Postman Always Rings Twice. Now, some of us might know these books more from the movie versions that came out in the 1940s, which are great, but I decided to read the novels. It's something I always wanted to do, and so I decided that year was the time to do it because I couldn't find too many good contemporary novels that were of interest, and so I read those and checked them off my list, but I also enjoyed them as well. But this video is just my own opinion and feelings about the state of contemporary novels. Now tell me what you think. Do you agree with me or not agree with me? Are contemporary novels getting worse, better, or mediocre? Are you looking for something different? Is there a book you read recently that you think is great and we should give a try? Please let me know in the comments as I welcome all discussions. I thank you so much for tuning in. Please be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the notification bell. I'll be back on Wednesday with a regular video, Friday with a food video, and next Sunday with another book video, as well as putting out different types of YouTube shorts. I thank you so much again, and I'll see you next time. Bye!